building our first model. Now it was a fine tune of an existing model. So we could do a bit of research and we could prove out the hypothesis that we could actually bias a model towards Australian data. Now, the very first go at that, we may have over-indexed a little bit on some of our data and we wound up creating bogan AI. It kept dropping the G off every word, gonna, doing, So it was very, 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 very much bogan AI.
Welcome to another episode of the Unicorns Podcast. Today's topic, artificial intelligence, and even better, an Australian version of AI. Australia has long punched above its weight when it comes to innovation, but in the global AI race, we've been slow out of the blocks. That might be about to change. Sovereign Australia AI is a new venture that's aiming to build the largest AI infrastructure in the country and use it to create a uniquely Australian sovereign AI platform. And it's backed by a high-powered ecosystem of partners. Today on the program, I'll be joined by Sovereign Australia AI founders Simon Criss and Troy Nielsen. We'll talk about why Australia needs its own AI version of ChatGPT, the aha moment that sparked the venture, why Australia needs sovereign AI now, and what it's going to take to build it. So let's get into it. Gentlemen, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Justin.
Sovereign Australia AI. Let's start with the big picture. Why does this country need its own sovereign AI capability right now? And what motivated both of you to get into this venture?
Okay, we kind of got a couple of questions
It's
in
a
this.
It's a big one.
Let's unpack them one at a time. So why does Australia need sovereign AI? Australia needs to be able to determine its own future, and it can't do that without sovereign capability across the board, not just in AI. But in the AI space, all of the foundational fundamental models that we're using today are predominantly coming out of the US or out of France or out of China. We need to be able to set our own agenda, incorporating our own values, and make sure that that's safe and secure right here in Australia.
But why do we need to do that?
The risk that we run by not doing that is that in the tariff war, we may be priced out of using AI and therefore drop behind the rest of the world. That's now a very real possibility. The other reason that we would want to do that is we need to understand how these AIs were built. If I can use an analogy, imagine building your house on a foundation that somebody else poured for you. Might be fine initially, but a couple of years in, you start seeing cracks in the floor. You don't know why that's happened. You don't know what mix they put into that foundation. And it's the same with AI. If we don't understand the foundation, particularly for key areas, defence, policing, healthcare, education, these sectors need to understand what's been put into a foundational model.
And so the second part of that first question, gents, was how did you arrive at this venture? I'm interested to know a little bit about your professional backgrounds and what the aha moment was when you thought, no, this is our next career. We are doing this. This is we're all in.
Yeah, so I think just to start on my own sort of background, academically, this is an area that's of keen interest to me. I have a PhD in AI and machine learning and an MBA as well. I've been in the entrepreneurial space for about 20 years now, so I've had a lot of experience in these areas. I was head of data and AI for Telstra here in Australia before ChatGPT landed, and so I got to sort of see and witness everything sort of leading up to that tech landing, and then everything that sort of transpired afterwards. For me, what was the catalyst was firstly, meeting Simon as we did just through the networking and whatnot, but aligning on so many of our views around what is shaping AI, and then more specifically the gaps in the Australian AI landscape, and watching it, and watching what was happening in the space. That gap was broadening, and there was a lot of conversation. Australia's full of gunners, but nobody was really going to step up and actually, take ownership of the challenge, because it's a really, really big thing that we're trying to undertake here. And Simon and I got together and said, look, somebody has to do this, with our backgrounds, our unique experiences, our complementary backgrounds, I should say, as well. We felt like we were the right fit for this. And so as we started, exploring through conversation and networking, we realised it was the right move, and so hence we decided to make the play.
This is it. And Simon, just refresh our listeners on your background.
So my background is at the exact opposite end of the scale to Troy, which is, I think, why we're so complementary, honestly. I'm not technical. I get befuddled in my own MacBook. But I understand the AI tech really well, and I've been working at that intersection of AI and business. So working with C-suites, boards, senior execs to understand what is AI, how are we going to use it, what are the risks, what do we do about governance models, how do we control this sort of stuff. So I come at it from that business end user perspective, where Troy comes at it from the technical perspective. And we had some great conversations around risks, actually, and the risks that we were seeing to Australian business and AI in Australia, and how are we going to combat those risks. And that was the aha moment where, as Troy absolutely perfectly put it, we both said, well, somebody's got to do it, and it might as well be us.
And so take us on that journey from initial concept, idea, to where you are now.
Yeah, it's been a fun little journey. It hasn't been very long, but it's been very fast. Once we kind of made the decision that this is what we were going to do, actually pieces just started to fall into place around us. It was clear that there was a demand for what we were doing. Government departments talking to us, industry bodies talking to us, telling us we need something for our area and we need it to be sovereign. A whole lot of the Australian government employees can't use ChatGPT because it's not sovereign, it's not safe. And so they're looking for something that is sovereign and safe. So we started down that path, and to use Troy's fantastic words, we didn't want to be gunners. We're going to do this and we're going to do that. So Troy actually set about building our first model. Now it was a fine tune of an existing model, but it was so we could do a bit of research and we could prove out the hypothesis that we could actually bias a model towards Australian data. Now, the very first go at that, we may have over-indexed a little bit on some of our data, and we wound up creating Bogan AI.
Tell us about that.
Yeah, Chat Bogan. It was...
good on you, brother.
Correct.
Yeah.
And it kept dropping the G off every word, gunna, doing, So it was very, 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 very much Bogan AI.
Yeah.
So we've kept that model actually just between the two of us
just to have a bit of
laughs.
Fun. Yes.
But we've since moved on and trained, and we did that on a tech stack and using our own money and everything to kind of stand this up. And we're now at that precipice where we're moving into truly building a full model. And we've got a lot of support, even from companies like NVIDIA, willing to bring in the latest GPUs that don't exist in Australia yet.
So what is it that you are in the process of building or have built? What does that actually meaningfully look like?
So we have built a fine-tuned version of the Llama language model. And we are, in the very near future, actually going to make that freely available to the Australian public. Here is the model. Here is the data that we use to bias the model And if you want to go in and curate that data a different way and you're technical, have at it. Actually, if you're going to do that, we'd like to talk to you about coming to work with us. And we've called that the Guinan model, Guinan being the smallest star in the Southern Cross.
Of course.
And so what we are now about to set about doing is building a true foundational model from the ground up. And it will be known as the Australis model.
So from the initial conversations that you've had across boardrooms, with government, the C-suite, what are some of the questions you're getting back from them about why you're doing this?
It was the exact question you asked right at the beginning. Why sovereign and why now? Can't we just download ChatGPT and use that?
I'm sure you've got good at answering this question, Scott.
We've heard it more than one time. It comes back to that whole thing around safety and security. You could be using Google's model. You could be using Microsoft Copilot. And as you type in the question and hit go, that has to go to a graphical processing unit somewhere in the world. And because Australia doesn't have that many GPUs, it's highly likely that that's being processed on a GPU in Barbados, Honduras, the USA. So do we truly have data sovereignty if our data is pinging backwards and forwards across the globe? So that's one of the reasons why we need this. The other one is, without it, are we truly masters of our own destiny? If we got locked out of you being able to access US-based AI tomorrow, what happens? And we're not the only ones doing this, right? If you look around the world, India's building a model, Singapore, South Korea, Canada, Switzerland are about to release their model. So we're not the only ones seeing this problem and trying to solve it.
And are you the only ones trying to do it in Australia?
We're the only ones that are as far down the path as we are. There are others that have talked about it. There are others that have, once again, fine-tuned an existing model, but at its core, it's still not sovereign. We're probably the furthest down the path as far as we know. We have, like I said, the latest NVIDIA tech actually on its way to Australia for us to use.
How did that come about, the link with NVIDIA?
Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. So we've been really adamant about needing to stand up this sovereign infrastructure alongside what we've been doing. So it's been a really, really important point for us. We knew that to do this properly, we need to compete both from a functionality perspective, but also a time to market perspective as well. The only way you get time to market in the AI space is with compute. The only way we're going to do that was with the latest tech. So in reaching out to NVIDIA, I think there's a combination of elements. So our approach that we're taking is unique in the Australian landscape in terms of us, vertically integrating, through everything. I think there was another important element there was around our approach to scale. We weren't taking a small view. We weren't looking to buy one GPU. So we've secured what we understand through conversations with NVIDIA is the largest AI cluster in Australia for this kind of workload. So we're looking at a very substantial amount of the latest cutting edge Blackwell GPUs. We're hoping to have them here in about 8 weeks. And that's probably the way that we sort of come through that sort of conversation. So I think it was the combination of both what we're doing and NVIDIA's appetite for this space as well. It also aligns with NVIDIA's sort of strategic, broader imperative around neo cloud and sovereign infrastructure. They've identified that sovereign infrastructure is important around the globe because they're seeing the impact of this sort of more globalized approach to AI and how it's not really playing out the way people thought. So again, I think that was another important element in that sort of in that conversation. So.
At a more practical level, as you've probably gathered, both Troy and I are happy to have a crack. So we kind of picked up the phone, got on email, and just started reaching out to people. And unsurprisingly, the doors just opened, and we wound up talking we had dinner with the country head of NVIDIA last night. Those kinds of doors are open because people can see this need.
So from a practical experience, from a user experience, what does that look like? The Australian version that you are building? Because people would be familiar with using AI, I would imagine, maybe in an office environment, but are you building something similar to that, or this is not going to be a rip-off of ChatGPT? It's entirely different. What we're doing is something else.
If you know how to use ChatGPT, how to use Claude, how to use Copilot, how to use any of those tools, you will know how to use ours.
Okay.
It operates essentially the exact same way. Just the responses that you get back are tempered a little bit differently. If you ask about work in the Navy, you're going to get answers about the Australian Navy rather than just defaulting to the US Navy. If you asked about the double jeopardy law, you're going to get the Australian interpretation over the US interpretation. The model will be aware of the US interpretation. It will just bias towards an Australian answer, because for most of those other tools that you're using, less than 2% of their data set is Australian data. We need a model where it's a lot more than 2%.
And so as you go to market, who are your potential customers, your clients?
I think it's everybody in Australia. From a business to consumer perspective, everybody who uses tools like ChatGPT would be potentially a client. The bigger clients for us are going to be those government departments that today don't really have or have very fettered access to generative AI. We're going to be able to help them.
And what are those industries?
No, the government departments.
All government departments, essentially.
A whole lot of federal government departments have already, and state governments have already mandated that you can't use the public interface to ChatGPT. So we may be able to open some of those doors. But other clients will be the big banks, the insurance companies, the telcos, where they need not only internal use, but for dealing with you as a customer. When you log on to the telco's website and you've got a question about your bill, you start chatting with a chatbot. That chatbot uses a large language model. So there's the opportunity will exist for them to use an Australian sovereign model that talks a little bit more like us and understands our culture a little bit more. You know, we have a very special culture of irreverence here in Australia, and we kind of want to be able to bring that through. So the set of customers will be quite broad.
It's a good point you raise about chatbots, because I don't think the average consumer thinks at all about what's going on behind the scenes there with that talking robot that's typing back at you, giving you some okay answers.
You're using it all the time. You're using it every day without realizing. When you ask your phone, you know, hey Siri, hey Alexa, and you start asking it a question, that is using a language model underneath to understand what you're saying. I have an Audi, and I can say to the car, hey Audi, open the sunroof. To understand those words, open the sunroof, needs to go through a language model so the computer knows what you're trying to do. When you go to the doctor and the doctor puts down the little speaker in front of you and says, do you mind if I transpose this whole appointment? That is going through a large language model. The question is, do we really want our medical data being pumped through a large language model that's in the USA that, for all we know, the FBI is looking at every single prompt that goes through?
Let's talk about that, because before I came down for this interview, there was a story about a patient who cracked it big time because the doctor warned them in advance that they were going to transcribe their session, and she didn't want to go ahead with the booking. Yes. So is that now commonplace if we use that one example of a medical practice where that is happening?
Yeah, it's in almost every practice. Oddly enough, I personally know the person that story was written about. And she is incredibly AI aware and knows exactly what the risks are. And the reason that she said, no, I don't want you doing that, is that the doctor couldn't tell her where the data was going to be processed. And it was her child that was the appointment. And she didn't want her child's data being strewn all over the planet. And so she refused to let them do the transcription.
And thus no appointment.
No appointment.
So what can you tell our listeners about privacy, security, protection of data through the model you're building?
Yeah, so I think more broadly, it's not so much about the mechanistic elements of that. It's more about the geographical elements. And so I think one of the things that's really important is that as Australians, to a certain extent, we have faith in the systems and infrastructure that are in place here in Australia. We know that there's Australian laws that protect us against a myriad of different things. What happens when our data is offshored is that we have zero control over it. And we're seeing at the moment there's a lot of conversations around how OpenAI mismanaged some of their conversational history, and it's now exposed and out on the web for everybody to see, which is hugely problematic. Here in Australia, we are a regulated country. We have a lot of acts and regulations that are designed to protect. And in this instance, data regulation is something that's a very, very hot topic at the moment. But the only way that we're ever going to be able to protect that and mitigate any kind of risk is by onshoring all our data and making sure that it never leaves our borders. And that's a really important consideration. So for us to do that, we've had to make sure that every layer of our tech stack, from the model itself, the chat interfaces that you were talking about before that sit above all that, down to all the infrastructure itself, is managed and set up in such a way that we have full and complete control over every bit of that data. And I think that's really, really crucial and very cornerstone. I think to look at it on the other side of that as well is that if everything goes well, you don't have a problem, right? And so it's only when things start to go awry that you have to worry about something like that. So that for us is what's most important. So we want to make sure that if something does go wrong, that we've got the infrastructure, we've got the policies and procedures and everything in place that can manage that, and that there is something that we can do in that instance as well.
Can I take your background in academia, a PhD and MBA? What this is probably a more broader question about AI. What does academia think about the evolution of AI, the pros and cons, where it's going?
Well, it's really
is this the start of Skynet?
Yeah, well, it's really interesting, right? So when these tools first become available, it was like an absolute no across the board from an academic setting. You cannot engage with any of these tools, blah, 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 blah. Really sort of challenging. What had happened, though, the world had moved on really quickly. So there was a 6-month period where this was new tech and it was all doom and gloom. And then the world moved on. The universities have done 180 degree. They're trying to embrace all of this. They're trying to play a little bit of catch up because they're realizing there's a huge academic play to be had here. The other side of it too that's challenging for them is their ability to access the compute infrastructure to actually test out tools, hypotheses and those sort of things that are needed. Bring this back to us for a moment. We do anticipate that through our processes we will have some ebbs and flows in our hardware usage, and what we hope to do through engagements that we've got with, say, Deakin, UNSW and a few of the others, is to open up our resources to academics to allow them to do things, test out new ideas. And with the scale of compute that we've got, the things that could take them 6 months to do on a HPC that they may have at the uni, which may also take them 6 months to get on the roster to use that,
yes,
they could potentially do in 3 hours on our hardware overnight, when we're not using that. So there's things there that we're trying to do. We're trying to really open up that conversation around Australian AI, and I think to do that we need to be very, very inclusive. So we're trying to work directly with as many of the academics as we can. Our advisory panel has several academics on there, and we're trying to utilise their experience in this space to open doors and engage as much as we can with the academic space as well, and try and help them engage and come to terms with these new changes.
And the word sovereign means a lot of things to a lot of people. And for us, it's about creating a high tide that floats all boats across Australia. And that includes supporting academic research. So we will be sponsoring some PhD candidates because we want the work that we're doing to continue to drive more research, more outputs that keeps us at the front or near the front of AI on a global scale. And definitely positions Australia well.
And I think too, just further to that, a little bit further, is around sort of informing policy as well, because at the moment, policy around AI usage regulation is rather ambiguous. And so
they're still catching up too, right?
They're still catching up. And so our approach is to take a very do with approach to policy. So we want to work with government early on in the piece. We've been having lots of conversations in that space to make sure that we're both engaged, we're communicating, but also working with them as they try and navigate the muddy waters of AI regulation. They can do that through visibility and transparency on what we're doing, and hopefully use our experiences to inform policy decisions down the road as well.
And have you found that Canberra has been receptive to what it is that you're building?
Incredibly receptive, overtly receptive, because they can see what it does for them without them having to do it.
Well, that was a question I was going to ask. Why won't government pick this up? If this is so important, why wouldn't they do it?
That's probably a question for Mr. Albanese.
Yes.
But look,
I'm yet to have Albo on the unicorns, but
we'll make that happen.
Come on, Albo.
Look, it needs to be done, and it needs to be done now. It's not something that we can necessarily wait for government, and the government themselves are still hearing opinions such as we heard just recently of someone saying, we don't need another LLM, we just need to download somebody else's. And that it's only now that they're starting to see and understand what all of the layers of sovereign AI mean and how it can be achieved in Australia. There's still a lot of people who think it can't be achieved, and actually it already is. At that application, UI, user interface level, we have some amazing companies in this country that are doing incredible work there. At the infrastructure level, we've got, some incredible data centres, 100% Australian owned, 100% Australian based, just doing amazing work. The piece that's missing is this foundational layer in the middle. And there are some foundational models, the Jasper AI is a great foundational model for image generation.
Yes.
We need something like that for language, and we don't have it. And that's what we're trying to solve.
Do you feel as though you guys are like trailblazers, where you're out like forging the path? You're doing a lot of the hard work and the heavy lifting on behalf of the country, and that it's going to be a lot easier for the people that follow you?
God, we hope so.
Yeah, I feel like it's that I've got that image in my mind of those old Indiana Jones movies where there's always the guy at the head of the trail with the machete hacking their way through the jungle, right? And then there's somebody in a carriage being carried behind, kind of thing.
Yes.
I feel like we are those guys with the machete at the front of all this, hacking our way through everything. But using your analogy, I think somebody's got to blaze the trail, and I think for government to engage, they've got to witness it being done, seeing that it can be achieved, and that there's people here in Australia willing to take that leap of faith and take that next big step. We understand that it's not an easy challenge, but it's something that we're willing to do, and through that we hope to build that engagement and build an entire industry around us. We don't want to be in this alone. We want to see everybody come along behind us and really benefit from the work that we're doing, blazing this trail.
So how are you, if you look at what's happening overseas, billions and billions of dollars has been spent on these companies. You're a emerging business, a startup. How on earth are you going to begin to fund this enterprise?
Look, if somebody out there wants to come and give us billions and billions, we will happily take the money. Look, we've started really humbly, money from Troy and I to get us to where we are. And we're now talking with some early stage investors that are happy to fund what we're doing and understand what we're trying to do. And we're not talking about billions and billions, because we're not trying to build the world's biggest, most fanciest, all bells and whistles. We're just trying to build the large language model that Australia needs at a foundational level. And the money is out there. We just need to, rope it in, bring it in. But we want people that are going to share the dream with us, the people that believe in what we're doing and why we're doing it.
And do you find that part of the challenge that you have is not only running the business, building the business, it's an educational journey as well as to why Australia needs
anybody
this.
who works in AI anywhere in Australia, it's an educational journey. That my consulting practice is 90% of the revenue is about AI literacy. It's about helping people understand what this is and how it works, because there's a lot of misconceptions. You say AI, people say, oh, ChatGPT. Well, yes, that's one form of AI out of about 1,000. And so helping people understand and decipher is going to have to be a part of our journey. We can't take people on the journey if they don't understand what the journey is.
It's like an electric, the electric motor vehicle industry. It's like, oh, are you guys Tesla? Yeah. No, well, there are other models. Yes, they're out there. So what are some of the challenges and the headwinds that you are facing in starting to climb this mountain, both commercially and structurally, I suppose, in getting this business off the ground?
Outside of lack of sleep, that's probably the biggest challenge right now. It's scary when we're both WhatsApping each other at 5:30 in the morning because we're both up and working.
That's a sleep in, guys. Come on.
Really, yeah. Well,
it depends on what time you went to bed.
That's true. That's true.
Look, the biggest challenge, you hit on it before, is people understanding what we're trying to do and why we're trying to do it and what's the need. That is probably the single biggest challenge. Once we solve for that, the rest will be there.
And I think that extends to the literacy piece, right? Like you've first got to increase that literacy, that AI literacy, so that they then can understand what the challenge is and why we're going after it. So
the next biggest challenge then is trust. So Australians, read any of the research that is out there, Australians don't trust AI. We see it, we know it, we love it, we just don't trust it. And we don't trust it because we don't understand it. It's not Australian built. What's going on with it? It's all a bit. So the literacy will go part of the way there. But the bigger thing that we're going to have to solve for is transparency, and we're building that way. So we want to produce a model for Australia where Australians know what it was trained on. They know where that data came from. They know what happened in the process. We have zero visibility of the other models from around the world as to how they were trained, what data was used, where it was done, how it was done. We don't want that for Australia. We want transparency and explainability, which aligns with the National AI Centre's guidelines on ethical AI, because it's going to instill trust. So we have a lot of work to do, not just technically, but we have a lot of work to do in the broader business and general community.
Simon and Troy, I'm excited for you. Go and fly that Australian flag proudly out there, and best of luck with the venture.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for your time, mate.